Hello, I'm Dr. Mo Anderson, and welcome to Drop the Drugs third webinar with a leading authority, national authority in our community, Dr. T. Bowman, Dr. Theron Bowman. And I am just really too excited to have him here. He is a longtime friend, but quite one of the most accomplished people you'll ever want to meet. Just really incredible guy. I am the CEO and founder of Drop the Drugs. You can find our website at dropthedrugs.org. You're on our Facebook page. I'd encourage you to like our page, follow us. Our mission as a 501c3 educational charity is to raise the awareness of the dangers of unsecured drugs in the home, prescription drugs and over-the-counter home. We encourage you to inventory your drugs, lock them up, the drugs that you need. Drugs that you don't need should be disposed of. Unused, expired drugs pose a danger in the home for your children and yourself. Self-medication, abuse often occur because of medications kept in the home unnecessarily. You can learn more about that on our Facebook page here, or Twitter, Drop the Drugs USA, or our website, dropthedrugs.org. That is my promotional message for our organization, but we cannot just keep talking about that over and over. So we started this wellness and engagement series to bring leaders to you like Dr. Bowman to talk about issues around wellness, around community, around public service. We've spoken to Dr. Brian Dixon, a psychiatrist, about mental health during COVID. Dr. Sheila L. Armstrong about what it's going to be like to go to the dentist now that we've got all the changes associated with the COVID pandemic. And today we're talking to Dr. T. Bowman. Welcome, Dr. Bowman.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. It's quite a pleasure being here. So thank you so much for the honor of being with you and your audience this evening.
Well, I can't tell you how excited I was when you accepted the invitation. I want to tell folks about your background. We have been touting you and lauding you, but some people may not have had the opportunity to read your entire bio that is on our events page. It's so long, it would take up the entire webinar. So I'm going to do some highlights. And if I leave something out that you think I should have added, by all means, please add it for the purposes of establishing your credibility here. It's not bragging tonight. We want people to know who you are and what you've done. Dr. Bowman began his career in 1983 as an officer at the Arlington Police Department in Arlington, Texas. Some people may be East Coast. And he was appointed chief in 1999. I don't know much about law enforcement ascension, but that sounds like a really amazing rise to the top there in just a few short years. He later served as the deputy city manager. Do I have that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Deputy city manager, and I can't even read my own writing. Department of Public. You were over the Department of Public Safety until he retired in 2016 and began his own company, a consulting company, the Bowman Group, working with law enforcement departments all over the country, looking into practices and policies and allegations, highly awarded. And he has 3 degrees from the University of Texas at Arlington, where my son, our remote producer, thank you, Tony, graduated from. You got your bachelor's. I didn't realize we both majored in biology. Pretty cool. I am Dr. Mo Anderson, DDS, and this is Dr. Theron L. Bowman, Ph.D. You got your master's as well from the University of Texas at Arlington, right?
That's correct. Yes. UTA Mavs. Go Mavs.
Go Mavs. And you folks who are watching us, thank you for joining us. If you can hear us, if the audio and video is okay, hit that smiley face, give us a comment so we know you're there and that you're able to that you're able to hear us and you're as ready and excited to go as we are. And please share it to your pages, share it to your networks. If you share the link, they'll see that it's live, they'll see that you're watching, and they can join this very important conversation. I want to make one thing clear before we start with these questions. And thank you, Mandolin. Please let us know you're here. Dr. Bowman, before we go too far, we've got some feedback that your audio is echoing. And so we'll let you take a look at it, addressing that. Might need to turn down the volume on your PC, or we may have to get you a headset. Thank you, Rainey, for that information, because what we're hearing is from Zoom and we see the picture, but you guys give us that feedback and let us know where you're from as well. Please like and share and check out Drop the Drugs later on. Dr. Bowman, what made you choose a career in law enforcement? And I'll say from the start, we've known each other since middle school or high school. And so, but I don't know what led you to make that decision. With your background as intelligent as you are, you could have done anything. Let's talk about what made you choose the blue.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mo. Well, first, before I answer that question, I need to say that in response to the bio that you provided me, I've known you've done many incredible things in your life and your career. I think Drop the Drugs may be your best so far. So I just want to give you kudos for starting this organization and the work that you guys have done with Grand Prairie PD and Chief Di and what you're doing for families and households here in this area. It's just amazing. So thank you so much, and kudos to you and your organization. You're doing amazing work, and I am just floored when I see what you're doing. I want to make sure that my volume is okay. Can you hear me okay, Dr. Mo?
I can hear you okay now. Now it looks like the video is going in and out a little bit, but it's all gonna work out. How's that? Is it better now in terms of the echo? Someone let me know in the comments box, because we want to make sure you guys can hear everything he's saying.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and talk, and I'll await clues or cues on adjustments needed. I have adjusted the microphone volume, so hopefully we can get rid of the echo. And if I need to put on headsets, I will to see if that will remediate the problem. Anyway, I am really honored to have had about a 35-year career in public service, and approximately 30 of those years in policing. And my parents really wanted me to go into the medical profession, and that's why I have the degree in biology, because I started out being a pre-med student, but I decided during the course of my college years that I really wanted to do something that didn't require organic chemistry, and so I went the law enforcement criminal justice route, and that's really how I changed over from pre-med to policing, and I joined the police department immediately after graduating from college.
Well, we are very, very happy that you made that choice for community service. You would have been an excellent colleague in healthcare as well. Thank you. That's a good idea to add the headphones. And everyone knows that we have glitches, sometimes technical problems with these webinars, but it will come together. Stick with us, folks. Keep giving us feedback. We appreciate you. League City, Fort Worth, thank you guys for joining us. Please like and share. We want to make sure people know about this important conversation with Dr. Bowman. So you chose a career in law enforcement right out of high school, and you served the city of Arlington, as I said in your introduction, in many leadership positions. Police chief, deputy city manager. At one point, I think you even did some work with the FBI. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, I think what you're remembering, Dr. Mo, is that I attended the FBI National Academy, and that was actually about a 3-month period in my life where I trained in Quantico, Virginia, where the FBI agents and many other law enforcement professionals in the U.S. trained. So I went there for about 3 months and had an opportunity to interact there with about 250 other people from around the world over that period there in Quantico. So yes, you do have that correct.
And your bio, your CV is pretty impressive, but that always stuck with me because that's not something I hear from a lot of people, that they got to go to Quantico and participate in FBI training or activities. So my next question, as we get into what you're doing now, before retiring, you retired and started your own company. You're the CEO and founder of the Bowman Group. And let's give that website at some point. I believe it's thebowmangroup.org, but it could be .com. My apologies for not getting that down. But tell me about your company and what you do as a police practices expert.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mo. And again, I started my company actually back in 1998. And so my company is more than 20 years old, but I didn't work my company full time until after I retired. And so when I retired from the city of Arlington, I went into the Bowman Group and started working with a group of other consultants on national and international projects. Now, some of the things that we do today, for example, we've been actively involved in helping school districts create their own police departments. I'm also a federal monitor, a federal consent decree monitor in multiple places and cities around the country, including New Orleans, Louisiana, Baltimore, Maryland. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, as well as Chicago, Illinois. And we can talk more about that work, but essentially those agencies have come up under federal oversight, federal oversight by a federal judge. And I've been appointed by federal courts in those cities to help oversee reform in those cities. And so we do a lot of that work. We also do just police practices work where we advise police departments around the country and around the world actually in what makes for the best practices today in policing, and especially today considering everything that's happening in policing.
Absolutely. And that I had this question for later, but since you mentioned oversight, I'm going to skip to a question about national databases. Why isn't there reporting about, you know what, let me put this out there clearly. With your background and with me working closely with law enforcement, we are not here to bash law enforcement. We're here to try to build bridges, try to get a better understanding, build the trust back, and just really, look at, yes, there's been a lot of violence. We know about George Floyd. We know that there have been protests all over the country, and we know that there has been a disproportionate amount of violence against unarmed African Americans. We're not looking away from that, but we also know that there are a lot of very good law enforcement officers in the over 18,000 law enforcement departments out there. So we want to be clear that we're not looking away from the problems and problematic people, but we definitely recognize our need for law enforcement, and that there are a lot of good officers like you've served, like I have family members who have served as well. And there will be an opportunity for question and answer at the end, folks. So stay around. Dr. Bowman is great. He doesn't tiptoe around things. He will answer your questions, but I want you to know where we're coming from, me as an individual and the organization, in regards to how we feel about law enforcement as a whole. But my question, I have to read here. I have so many thoughts, and so many people have sent me questions that they want me to ask you. 40% of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the country report complaints to the federal government. Why isn't there a centralized database for tracking police conduct, both good and bad? You mentioned oversight, and that's what made me think of that question.
Okay, sure. Yeah, there have been efforts to create national sources of data, like a police complaints or police use of force database. But because we designate these as national efforts, the funding has to come from somewhere. And so, although those recommendations have been flown out there, there hasn't been a source of funding heretofore designated by the federal government, typically, to create and fund in an ongoing basis that kind of a database. And so it doesn't exist. It typically takes federal action. It takes votes by Congress and by the legislature or legislative authorities to make a federal database like this, either to fund it or to make it happen, and there hasn't been the political will or the funding to do it so far. I think academics in particular have requested it, because you have a number of academics who do police research who would like to share this kind of information with the public. And I think we have a lot of police chiefs and police departments who would participate in this kind of an effort, but the machinery, the system to put it in place and to fund it just has not been authorized by Congress, and therefore we have bits and pieces here. Some departments are very transparent, and they self-report this information, but there just isn't a national source for all of those reasons and some.
Okay, that's good to know, because we are going to talk about later as individuals, what can we do, and talk to our Congress people about what can we do on a local community level. But I think that's important when I think about dentistry, and I've been told I need to switch to headphones and a microphone, a headset like you, and I'll do that in a moment because we want to make sure people can hear. But we have a PMP, so a pharmacy monitoring, prescription monitoring program, so that before you write that hydrocodone prescription, you can look and see in that database everywhere this individual has gotten a prescription. And it's fairly new for all of the states. For a long time, you could just doctor shop, and get prescriptions everywhere. For me, I'm licensed in 3 states. You can look on the National Practitioner Database, see my licensing, see my history. And so we know it's possible. We know the platforms are out there, and I think that's something we need to move toward. I'm going to shoot you another question, and then I'll disappear for a moment as I get my headphones, but I can't hear you. In the wake of George Floyd's death, we've seen worldwide protests and calls for police reform. But what that looks like, I think, varies from city to city, state to state, department to department. So my question is, is the excessive use of force against unarmed individuals, which I alluded to earlier. I'm sorry, it varies from one, getting ahead of myself. We've had protests and calls for police reform, and it varies, but adequate training and continuing retraining are always mentioned. That's the consistent thing that I've seen as I look at calls for police reform. Now, is the excessive use of force against unarmed individuals caused by inadequate training, culture, or both?
Well, I don't think we have enough time tonight to explore uh, why what we see in policing that's either proximate to policing or caused by police actions, why it occurred. And so there isn't just one answer
Okay.
to that question. Certainly over the last several years, this issue of excessive force against unarmed people, and especially unarmed black men, has been at the forefront of the media. And it's obvious that these incidents have occurred. So your question is why have they occurred, and why do they continue to happen? Well, let me tell you, training may be part of it, but I also think that too often training is used as a scapegoat to not call things as they are. Sometimes things, the incidents happen because of it's just a complete set of bad circumstances and terrible circumstances that come to bear in the twinkling of an eye. In a moment, a decision has to be made, and sometimes the best decision isn't made. Sometimes the right decision isn't made. Sometimes the right decision is made. But when you have a confluence of events all at one time, where you have to think, the officer has to think in a split second, training will influence what decision that officer makes. But the actions that are taken by officers who are subsequently convicted tend to not be related to training. They tend to be related to motivation or to their mindset at the time they took that shot, or at the time they engaged in that action. And quite often, it doesn't matter what amount of training you have if you're not motivated to act in the best interest of the person you're confronting and in the best interest of law and the Constitution, then I don't know that the training is going to really matter. I have to say that police officers, most police officers that I've ever met and I've ever talked to, are well intended. They go out every day and every night intending to serve the public and to do their best job. But there are some police officers, and I think it's just a few. It's just a few. Just like in every profession, you have some doctors who have gone to prison for prescription fraud, but that's not every doctor. That's just a few. Policing is the same. There are some who shouldn't be police officers. There are some who, in these situations, they don't think and they don't act like they understand that the person that they're confronting is totally reliant upon their thoughts and actions to live and to go home and to see another day and to see their families. And so they don't think and they don't act in that manner. So is training an issue? Training certainly is an issue. But we also have to make sure that we look at who we recruit, what our entry-level standards are, who we bring into the law enforcement profession, and then how we treat the officers when they come to work and how they are supported by the cities, by the agencies that they work for. Not many people know
that police reform also has as a really significant component police officers' support. How do we know that before an officer who's having difficulties in his or her emotional life, how can we know that those difficulties might impact their decision making? And so police reform also includes implementing early indications, early identification systems where when officers are having difficulty, they can be taken off the line and maybe not engage in confrontation when they need to be taken off and given another assignment. Sometimes officers work 12, 14, 16 hours. And when officers are overworked, that tends to affect their decision-making capabilities. And so how often officers work, how long they work, how many off-duty jobs they work, whether they're working sick or sleepy or tired, all of that affects their decision-making. And so police reform also includes questions about how are the cops being treated? Are they going to work tired, or are they allowed to work 5 part-time jobs and then go to work on a 10-hour shift and work 6 hours of overtime? So those are parts of the equation, but those issues are part of the equation as well. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about police reform, that we're not just talking about changing what the police do, but we also want to make sure that we change the support systems so that the cops out there have the time, the pay, the support they need to be sharp and to do the jobs that they do every single day, day in, day out.
There's a lot there to unpack, and I really appreciate the way you did and the frankness in saying just like there are bad healthcare providers and bad people in fast food franchises, that there are some officers who should not be in that position. One of the things you mentioned was recruitment and the guidelines in terms of what the officers are allowed to do. Now, that sounds like it's leadership and policies. I know some departments require that officers have a degree in order to apply. And as I recall, I think Arlington Police Department is one of those. Do you think that obviously if people have emotional issues at home, mental things, we're not confusing having a degree with having other issues, but do you think that raises the caliber of officer that is brought into a department if they have to have a associate college degree or certification of some type?
Yes, Dr. Cole, I'm a very firm believer that education first is important. Education is important for everybody. It's important for police who are making very complex decisions, who are using a lot of different, really contemporary kinds of technology to bring to their practices on the community that hopefully improve the quality of life. So education is important, even for people in the community. There is a correlation between education attainment and crime. And so what the research shows is that the higher the education, the higher education tends to correspond with lower criminal activity. So does that mean that everybody who's well educated won't be a criminal? No. So does that mean that everybody with a college degree should be a police officer? No. Does that mean that every police officer with a college degree is a better police officer than one without a college degree? No, that's not what that means anyway. But I believe that college education in particular is really important for police officers. And if you think back to your experience in college, for a lot of people, they grow up in a secondary school environment that's very homogenous. And then you get to college, and in the college classrooms are typically are students from all walks of life. You learn how in college classrooms to communicate with people from all walks of life. You learn how to listen, how to make an argument, and how to communicate your points across without being emotional. You learn how to start and complete a task and assignment, and you demonstrate the ability to actually start something and finish something through the college experience. So, college education shows us a lot of different things for a person who has gone through the college educational process. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be, necessarily better. But if you take 100 people who want to be a police officer, and 100 people for a degree, and 100 people who have no college education, I believe that the group of 100 college-educated people will make a generally speaking, a better group of officers, because they have that interaction with other people. They have developed that empathy for people who are unlike themselves. They've developed the ability to listen. They've developed the better ability to communicate with others. And policing today is much more communication than it was 30 years ago when I was much younger. Back in the 60s and 70s, when there were height and weight requirements for police officers. You had to be a certain height, a certain weight, and they said height and weight in proportion. Well, police officers were expected to be able to fight and whoop people, and you had to come with this. And I think policing back then was probably 90% physical and 10% cognitive. But policing today is very different. The public demands a different style of policing, and you have to come equipped with the ability to communicate, with the ability to use technology, with the ability to conduct statistical analysis and be data-driven, and to do those things. And college education helps to facilitate acquiring those kinds of skills that it takes to really be effective in contemporary societies nowadays.
Excellent response. And I like how comprehensive you're being and being very balanced there. And as you said that, I thought about, at Baylor, what I do now and what I learned at Baylor are two vastly different things, but I learned strategic thinking. I learned to work with diverse people, and I learn patience a lot. So analytical skills. So you make a good point regarding the additional skills for just communication and so forth that are made with higher education. And as you said, that doesn't mean there aren't bad people. Like most of the documentaries I watch are people with college degrees doing very bad things. So we get that. And I appreciate you guys. Actually, I think you guys lost my audio there for a moment. I was just saying that college teaches you strategic thinking and analytical thinking as well. I appreciate you guys sending your comments. We will do some Q&A toward the end. We want to get through some of the questions that we had prepared first, and thank you for letting us know that the audio is better as well. Please click that wow face, like the way Facebook's algorithm works. Believe it or not, the more interaction there is, the more they will promote whatever the particular broadcast is. So like and comment away, and we will scroll back through and get to some of your questions. Thank you for your participation. Your company, I want to go to this one because this has come up a number of times. People keep asking this. Defund the police. What does defund the police even mean? Does it just mean they don't have a budget anymore? We're taking away some of the budget. What would we do with the money taken away? And we're speaking generically, of course, but I hear that phrase a lot from protesters and from people talking about reform. Help us out.
Defund the police. I think that means different things to different people. As the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, I think what that means is in the eye of the person speaking that. But let me say this. What I believe is every call to defund the police is an expression of frustration with what they perceive the police providing to them in the way of services. Policing here in America is almost 200 years old. The first American police department started about 1820, 1830, 1, 2, 3. And so we're close to the 200-year anniversary. And when policing here in America started, we developed this concept of kind of a social contract where we in the U.S. agreed to give up our freedom in exchange for police policing us, in exchange for being police, in exchange for a lawful and orderly society. And so what we request as Americans in our democracy is that we're treated with dignity and respect, that we're treated fairly and justly, and that the police who have the ability to take our freedom away do so while providing all of us equal protection under the law. And so I think when we hear the cries to defund the police, we're hearing people say, hold on, the police haven't upheld their part of the bargain. The police part of the bargain is that, okay, I'm giving up my freedom voluntarily, but in exchange, you got to protect my rights. You have to protect me. You have to act act the way that's in my best interest. And I think their perception is that the police have not done that. And so the cry to defund the police, I think, by and large, is a way of saying we have to do things differently today. The police are almost 200 years old, and I'm not experiencing bias-free policing. I'm not experiencing police really trying to enhance my quality of life. But my experience is that the police are concentrating on that 5% of society who are criminals and treating us all that way, versus looking at the 95% of law-abiding citizens and saying, what can we do to help support, to help promote more of whatever it is that people have that causes them to be law-abiding? What can we do to promote more of that? So defund the police, I think, is saying, if the police can't get it right, let's just scrap it. Let's start all over. Let's do something. I don't think many people really have a plan or a strategy for what society would look like without police. And I certainly would hate to be one.
I don't want to say that. There's a commercial out right now where people they're saying the echo is back. There's a program out right now where people are calling, and thank you guys for the feedback. Are you hearing echo when I'm speaking? Can I get some comments? Or is it just when Dr. Bowman is speaking? There's a commercial that shows someone calling 911 and they put them on hold, and it's like, if this is a raid, press 1. If this is a break-in, press 2. It's a bit, I think, absurd, but it makes the point of imagine life without enough officers or without officers at all. The echo from your daughter is saying it's just when he's speaking. And thank you, Bowman family, for supporting us. We're going to figure it out. So I get you. That's it. Just like the protest is the language of the unheard. People are frustrated and historically have, whether it's in China or India or the United States in the 60s, we have gone to protest as in peaceful protest in particular, the vast majority as a form of making our unhappiness unknown, or expressing our displeasure with what's going on in a particular area. You mentioned bias in your last answer. What that leads me to this question. Your company actually offers training in implicit bias. I saw on your website. What does that term mean in regards to policing and police enforcement, law enforcement, and how does it impact decision making?
Sure, and let me apologize to those of you who are experiencing difficulty with my audio. Obviously, I have some audio problems, and I'm not the greatest technology person when it comes to repairing audio on the fly. So let me apologize to you and ask you to hang with us, and we'll keep working on it and see if we can't get it perfected by the end of the night. And if we can't fix it, then I'll ask Dr. Anderson to buy you all a drink at your favorite bar at some place at some point in the future.
All the free municipal water you can drink. I got you, Ice. I got you.
And anyway, implicit bias. All of us, everybody has biases, and an implicit bias is an unconscious bias. It's an attitude that we have, some perceptions that we have that don't really come to the surface, but they affect the way that we decide. They affect the way that we discriminate, let me say, and they affect the way that we engage other people. So regarding policing, let me put it like this. There was a criminologist named Jerome Skolnick. Jerome Skolnick coined the term symbolic assailant. A symbolic assailant is the prototypical criminal. In your eyes, if I ask you, in your opinion, what does a burglar look like? Well, you would probably tell me your perception of what the average burglar would look like. Or what does a robber look like? You would tell me your perception of the average robber. And so how that translates into in policing is that for a police officer who has implicit biases, and we all do,
right?
Then when he or she is looking for a robber, quite often their prototypical robber, the image in their mind of who that person is and what it looks like, typically comes to bear on their observations. Okay, just like if you have been bitten by a dog at any point in your life, then you're probably afraid of every dog, regardless of the fact that you've only met that one that bit you. And so police officers and other people, when we have these images of people, and in a crime-related situation, we look for what we think that person is. So if we're looking for a robber, we're looking at the stereotypical, prototypical, symbolic assailant kind of an image. And so what implicit bias research has shown us that our implicit biases, our stereotypical images, our biases and perceptions, a lot of times affect our decisions, and our reactions. And so if we think that a meth dealer is a skinny guy with long brown hair, then when we're looking for a meth dealer, that's what we're looking for.
And bad teeth.
Yeah. So quite often, who we arrest, who we interact with, is largely a consequence of our beliefs and perceptions, and not necessarily reality. So that's the implicit bias angle.
Absolutely. And I've seen that play out in many, many ways. In fact, I watched a study, a test recently. There was a beautiful young black girl, little African American girl, about 5, and they had dolls in, various hues, from a very, pale white doll to a brown skin olive doll, all the way up to a dark skin doll. And they asked the little girl at 5, beautiful little girl, which one of these dolls is a bad girl? And she said, the darker skin doll at 5. It broke my heart. And, you know, just showing that can be ingrained early on. And that's just going to impact her. But if you take that against another population, another ethnicity, I can definitely see where it's going to affect your decisions. And then we get driving while black and walking while black and barbecuing while black. Because as you said, there are people out in the community. It's not just some law enforcement people whose implicit biases affect their decision making. I have them as well. I confront myself sometimes when something comes in my head. I'm like, where the heck did that come from? Is it images I'm seeing in the media? Is it some novel I read? I want to, confront that. And when I hear it from other people, I'll speak up, which is something we have to start doing, is being more outspoken. But back to our topic, we have someone asking a question here. I'm going to pick a question out of the comments. Because she's asked several times, and I don't even know what this means, but I bet you will. The question is, do you think LEO agencies should administer physiological evaluations across the board as part of the hiring process?
That's should law enforcement agencies essentially administer physiological exams? So the answer is in Texas, physical exams are required as part of the hiring process, as are psychological exams, as are drug tests. And so there is just a litany of physiological exams already required by state law here in Texas. The process is very invasive. If you've ever applied to be a police officer, you've probably had to complete a 25 to 35 page document called the personal history statement. It asks you about everything. And then you've had time to go quite an intense physical exam as well. So I think, yes, it is the right thing to do. The question is, should those physical type exams continue periodically? Should they continue at the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark, a 15-year mark? Certainly, if it takes a certain level of physical fitness and emotional fitness to join an agency, then should you automatically be vested the rest of your police career, or should you be required to periodically undergo those same kinds of exams at certain other points in your career? Well, that's a big elephant in the room, because what you find in police agencies all over the country is police officers don't believe that we should undergo those exams subsequent to being hired. And in most agencies, there are no physical fitness requirements or physical fitness examination requirements after you get hired on. So should they happen? Certainly they should happen. But also think that we need to find ways throughout an officer's career to make sure that they're optimally fit emotionally and physically as well, because if you're not, then that's going to affect the way that you interact with people who rely on you to keep them safe.
Absolutely. And Mandolin, thank you for that question. I just, I feel a little more woke now because I had no idea. I just assumed that was part of the process. And we have people on here. I see some people I know who live in other states. So thank you for making it broader than Texas. And folks, let us know where where you are now. Drop your state and city in the comments, and just let us know if you're enjoying this, if this is helping you. And I don't mean in a fun way, but we're here to inform and engage with you. And we'll get to some more questions shortly. One of the things, and I'm going back and forth trying to keep this balanced, but also hit key issues. One of the things a lot of people are concerned with on both sides of the protest is that if we continue with the current, shall we say, the relationship between the community and the police department in many areas, not everywhere, but in many areas seems to be disintegrating. And that's destabilizing for everyone. It's got to be, I know how it feels as a member of the community with two African-American sons. You have children out there that you want to be safe, but it's also got to be on the other side with officers thinking about their personal safety and their public safety. There's got to be an impact on morale. I'm reading about officers who are quitting, that recruitment is down, pulling back on enforcement. I don't know if this is, I'm hoping it's not happening on a broad scale, but I can see where it would be happening because, again, I said it's destabilizing. For the officers, I'm sure you're still in contact with a lot of your friends and colleagues. You're doing training. How are they coping right now in general, from good to bad? What are they feeling right now as we go through this difficult, challenging time?
Yeah, Dr. Mo, it is a very, very challenging time for police officers, generally speaking. As you're indicating, they're not getting paid any more than they were, 6 months ago. But they're dealing with COVID as first responders. They're going to places, going to scenes, and they're as protected as they can be. But you have, for example, in Baltimore, over 400 officers have been quarantined because of exposure to COVID. And then police departments all over the country, you have officers who have contracted the disease, and that's very difficult. But then the police community relations part post George Floyd is another issue and concern. We've seen officers who have had urine thrown at them, officers who have had feces thrown at them, have had fireworks shot at them, and again, they don't get paid more when they are confronting those kinds of very dangerous and very difficult situations. And police officers are people too. And we all need to know that we're doing a good job. We all need a pat on the back every now and then. And every police officer, regardless of who they are or where they are, every time they go out, they really are putting their lives on the line. And so when you're putting your life on the line, and when you've had two coworkers killed in the line of duty by a sniper, and you go out and you're trying to protect, and you have feces and urine and other things, or water bottles and ice thrown at you, I think that could have a real demoralizing impact. And that's not to say that people shouldn't express their displeasure in one way or another. The Constitution guarantees all of us certain rights, but for police officers who have just kind of at their wits' end, they are feeling like this is a thankless job. and they're trying to do the right thing. And again, I believe most police officers out there are trying to do the right thing. They're in the profession for the right reason. It's very demoralizing right now to do that. They're working short. The COVID situation has required the investment of funds in other areas. Plus, it's really hit municipal budgets really hard. And so a lot of cities are in the process of creating a budgets for the next year, and there's not money there for overtime. And there's maybe retirement money is in question. And so officers are being impacted directly, but then it's becoming very difficult to recruit officers, to attract officers, to fill in the voids and the gaps where officers are leaving. So morale is not good in the profession right now, and it's very difficult to see over the next 2 years how we're going to be able to fill the vacancies and attract new people into the policing profession.
That is a challenge to hear, and all around it just kind of makes all of us sad, from the COVID to the people who've been pulled over. And I'm glad you said that, Dr. Bowman. If you're just joining us, this is Dr. Theron Bowman, former police chief, longtime public servant. He's worked for the city of Arlington right out of high school for much of his career, and retired in 2016 to start the Bowman Group, which is a consultant group. He works with law enforcement departments, the Department of Justice. I've got an impressive list around here of some of your clients, the ACLU, district attorneys, the city of Fort Worth, Nevada, and I believe you've done some things internationally, assisting in investigations, assisting departments with training, reforming policies and practices in response to complaints, and because they simply reached out to you. So thank you for doing that. You're certainly well qualified and a welcome voice to this conversation. It's really nice to hear a balanced perspective, but a very frank perspective. And when you talk about, one of the things people are always saying is, well, she was talking back to the police. She was being rude. She wasn't cooperating when someone gets tased or something happens to them. And I think this has come to me from many people in various forms, but it just seems like we've all seen people, whether it's in person or on cops, who are being vocal, don't understand why they were stopped or pulled over or whatever is happening to them. And they are making that known that they're not happy about it, and nothing happens to them. And then other people, literally recording it and saying, why is this happening? What did I do? And, they may end up handcuffed, injured, or worse. And it seems disproportionate to African Americans. Is that a media portrayal? Or are they just highlighting that? Or is there statistically, is it more often that African Americans are arrested for not being cooperative?
My first disclaimer: I haven't looked at every police department in the country, and so this could vary by police officers or police departments. But what I have seen, generally speaking, in agencies that I've looked for, people of color, primarily African American people, are arrested or are the subjects of use of force at disproportionately higher rates than other people in the population. That may not be the case at every single police department, but generally speaking, at agencies all over the country, I've had a chance to look at, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of police departments. African Americans in particular tend to be the subjects of of higher uses of force more often. And from what I've looked at, more often than not, it's not warranted by the circumstances. So you have to explain it in other ways. So I would have to agree with you, Dr. Mo, on that.
Understood, and not trying to put you on the spot, just wanting to put people's questions out there. And that's a question I had as well. I have not had it occur to me, but I've had it occur to family members. I've seen it happen. And, you know, we have to recognize we're seeing slices of the world, even if it's on the news, is curated for a particular purpose. So obviously, you can't speak for everyone or about everyone, and we're not looking for that. We're just trying to understand a little better and bridge the gap. We have a question.
I can let me just add a tidbit onto that. You know, since you know, it may not mean anything, but you mentioned earlier that you have children, and I have children, and one of my children just a couple of weeks ago actually was driving on a tollway here in this area. It was a she, and on the front of her car was a license plate that has her sorority signs and symbols. And so because she was on a highway, I think the speed limit was like 75, she was driving 67. A police officer pulled up, came from the other side, pulled up behind her, on side of her, and then passed her. And when he went past her, apparently saw her plate on the front with the African-American sorority on it. He fell back behind her and stopped her on the freeway in heavy traffic. His reason for stopping her was that she didn't have a front license plate. And so, but he knew that she was African American by the license, by the plate that was on the front of her car. So it's those kinds of situations where we're in a COVID environment. You're on a freeway with traffic going 70 to 80 miles an hour. Is not having a front license plate, but there was a back license plate. Was that really important enough to stop and write her a warning for that? Well, we have to really think about our actions that we take, and whether or not if we can, but if we should engage in those actions. And I think what I hear from people of color is a lot of times they are the subject of police actions because the police can do it, but they feel that the police should not engage in it. And I think that's an argument, or that's a discussion that we really need to have a lot more often between police and communities of color in particular.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping that conversations like this one, I've read numerous articles. I saw where you were on a panel with Mayor Lightfoot talking about police reforms. There's a lot of discussion, and I'm hoping that that's getting the ear of people who need to hear it, so that needed changes can take place at the right time, which is now, for the right reason, not just because of the outcry, but because it needs to be done. There's enough data out there to show that a lot of these reforms need to take place. You mentioned that your daughter got pulled over. I'm not going to say your kids' names or anything, but I do know that you have a son. Everybody knows now, thanks to the TV show Blackish, if they didn't know before, that most African Americans have conversations with their children about how to behave, particularly sons, if they are pulled over, alluding back to the, don't appear aggressive, no sudden movements. I'm just curious. I'm not sure. I think you were probably still with the police department when your son was in high school, and before that, when he started driving. Did you have that talk with him?
Absolutely. And Dr. Mo, my son is now 30-ish, and he's a medical doctor. And quite frankly, I still worry about him being stopped and pulled over and not treated appropriately. So I had to talk with him as a teenager, but even today, I still worry because he is who he is, and he is what he is. And part of my worry is because I, as a former chief of police, as a former city manager, at 10 o'clock at night, walk up, park on the parking lot of a grocery store, walk up, and as I walk up, I hear locks popping, the electric locks locking because of fear of me and what I look like, and apparently the perception thereof. And I fear for my son and my children today too. I hope for the best, but I'm a realist as well, and I think it's just incumbent upon all of us to continue to have these conversations with our children because. We're never out of that danger zone, and we won't be until something happens to put us all on equal footing.
You're right, because the change is, as much as we'd like for it to be instantaneous, is going to take some time and some training and some new policies and practices. And you just reminded me of something that I had, as we must do, I had put way in the back of my mind. I thought out of my mind. I took my family on an excursion, my daughter-in-law and I and the grandkids and my two sons, to a very large mega spa that we have here in Texas. It was over in Dallas. And I didn't even think about it. My daughter-in-law and I separated and went to the pool area, and they were going into the different rooms of the spa. And they told me later and how they could just experience that and not come to me and say, we want to leave. Every room they went into, and we're just talking about bias and prejudice, with scrubs on, the things you wear in a spa and nothing else, barefoot, that the people left at a spa. And being a female, I don't get that type of reaction, but it just made me think about what else might have happened in their lives that I'm not even aware of, because they're so accustomed to it that it's just become second nature that this might happen, or if I get on an elevator, someone's going to get out, or doors will lock, and it's just, so we're not just talking about law enforcement, we're talking about America. These protests, these discussions are either bringing out allies and something very, very good, or they're bringing out something I can only describe as wicked, based on some of the things that have been said to me recently, particularly online. But we're going to press on and try to do the right thing and enjoy our lives nevertheless, but it's on the back burner. If you guys are enjoying this conversation, if it's working for you, you're learning something, you appreciate Dr. Bowman, just give us a like, give us a smiley face, share it. This is Dr. Theron L. Bowman, who is a former law enforcement officer, longtime chief of police, has worked his way up the ranks and now works with law enforcement departments all over the country, highly sought after authority on law enforcement practices. And we are very, very grateful to have him here with Drop the Drugs today, as part of our ongoing wellness and engagement series. And because our overall mission, we want you to dispose of unused drugs and inventory your drugs and make sure you know what your kids are taking and at what time and where. And but we also want to make sure that your overall wellness, that's something we share, is a commitment to overall wellness, and that we're talking about things that are topical and timely and of interest that can make your life better. So again, thank you for being here to talk about the past and future of policing in the United States. You made me aware of the Pillion principles. We were talking about the start of policing. And beyond the 200 years here in the United States, I believe it was Dr. Robert Peel established law enforcement, established police departments in the 1800s in London. And I looked at those principles and I was just taken aback at how relevant they are to today, and particularly what's going on now. You know a lot more about him than I do. Could you just kind of paraphrase, summarize that for us, who he was and what really began policing, what the ideas were and what the purpose was?
Yes, sure. Sir Robert Peel was the British Home Secretary in London back in the 1800s, and in 1829 actually created the first modern police force called the London Metropolitan Police. And so in establishing the London Metropolitan Police, Sir Robert Peel created what's now called, as you referred to, Peelian principles. He created 9 principles, or you could, today you'd probably say the mission statement for the London Metropolitan Police. And I agree. I think those principles are as relevant today as they were back in 1829 when the London Metropolitan Police, which incidentally is the predecessor and the model upon which the American police forces were built. And then we saw policing start in Boston and Philadelphia and New York a few years after the London police were formed. Well, amongst those principles include the thought that to the extent the police can gain voluntary cooperation from the public, lessens proportionately their need to use force. Another principle was that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being those members of the public who are paid to perform the duties that are incumbent upon all of us. And so as you go through those principles one by one, what you see is Sir Robert Peel espoused the thoughts of a police department that used minimal force only when necessary, recognizing that voluntary cooperation was really what was important. And Peel also said that the really measure of the effectiveness of the police is in the absence of crime, not in the presence of police activity. So how many tickets you write, how many arrests you make, to Peel wasn't as important as being able to say, we have a safe and orderly society, and we use the least amount of force that we could in order to propagate that. And I talk about Peel's principles all the time because I think they are, as you said, very relevant today.
And thank you so much for enlightening me on him. I went to Wikipedia. I just dropped his name in the comments so that you guys can see that it's Peel. And I would encourage you at another time, not right now, to go and read more about him, and particularly those 9 principles. I believe there were 9, as I recall, because it is just timeless, and I think something that we need to revive in terms of, how policing is done and how we approach the community. And when I think about that, I'm wondering, are most officers in training, are the officers that you've worked with, departments that you've worked with, are they taught methods of de-escalation and communicating with people who are aggressive, who are upset? Is that part of the training?
Well, I think more and more recently it is part of the training, but let me tell you, the the biggest push for de-escalation training really came as a result of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. And that task force, among its pillars and recommendations, included recommending de-escalation training for law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies. And so what we see today is some police departments have started to include training on de-escalation in their use of force training. But I think the more contemporary approach has been to establish a standalone de-escalation policy. To have a separate policy on de-escalation, and then to have officers and supervisors held to that policy standard in every interaction that they have with the community. And so you're not just looking at officers' use of force, but you're also constantly asking questions. Did the officer have an opportunity or even an obligation to de-escalate when they should have or when they could have? The de-escalation philosophy and de-escalation policies really seek to eliminate what's called officer produced or officer created jeopardy, I think is the term, officer created jeopardy, where an officer in a situation may not have the initial right to use force, but has continued to escalate the situation to the point where he or she now has the legal authority to use that level of force, where if they had de-escalated, the situation never would have gotten to that point. So de-escalation, well, let me give just a quick example. I was looking at an incident where a person had a gun to their head and was threatening suicide. Okay, and at this particular agency, the officers around that person, instead of taking cover behind cars, behind posts, behind something that would protect them should the person decide to start shooting, they approached that person in the middle of the street with nobody else around. That person moved the gun down from his head, officer shot and killed him. So a de-escalation approach would have said, okay, we have time, we have cover, we have the ability to not have to take immediate action right now. Let's let this play out a little bit. Let's give it some time and space, and maybe we can save this person's life. They clearly are having a mental episode. So de-escalation helps to put time and distance between a final decision and the incident as it's unfolding. And these policies and practices have proven today to help reduce the police use of force.
And I've seen that in several agencies, statistically significant reduction and changes, and that they've also been able to tie it with, rewarding officers for, not using force in situations where force would have been warranted. And so I'm hoping to see more of that. I think about just so many incidents that we've seen on the media where you just think some communication would have made, good communication would have made such a difference in the outcome. That answer, and we're getting to the last question that I have, and then we'll go. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments, and we're going to ask Dr. Bowman a couple of questions before we sign off here. He's being very gracious with this time. We had planned on an hour, but this is just fascinating to me, and I hope you're enjoying it. Feel free to share it. If you have questions, now's the time to post those. Adults with severe mental illness, by several published reports, account for 1 in 4 people killed in police encounters. What are your thoughts on having mental health or medical experts responding to calls as part of a team, or however they determined to do that if it's a mental health call. I guess I want to know, are we asking the police department to do too much, things that other departments or organizations could do?
Sure, that's a great question, and let me just start off by saying police academy training, while it prepares a police officer to handle the average call, academy training does not prepare police officers to handle the intricacies of a call that involves a person in a mental health crisis. Handling those calls, I mean, a police officer may be able to arrive and stabilize the situation, but you want to do more than stabilize. You want to actually diagnose the problem, de-escalate while you're there, but the diagnosis will also include getting the person to the treatment that they need in order to address the problem or the concern, the root cause of the problem or the concern. Police officers are not psychiatrists, they're not therapists, they don't have typically the knowledge or the skill to conduct the proper diagnosis and direct that person to the appropriate treatment based on the type of difficulty that the person is having. But there is a kind of a newer type of training that police officers have started to receive. Some officers, it's usually voluntary, it's called critical crisis intervention training, CIT. And Memphis, Tennessee has a pretty reputable CIT model. I think Cleveland, Ohio has adopted aspects of the Memphis model. But police officers undergo at least 80 hours of CIT training and become CIT certified. There are continuing education units required, but they become certified and they develop the knowledge and the ability to respond. So when a mental health type call come out, if an agency can direct a CIT officer to respond, to go to that situation, then there is a better opportunity to actually understand what kind of crisis that person is experiencing, to route them to the appropriate services. And if a trained police officer isn't there, then certainly a mental health professional, a team that includes a mental health professional is a more contemporary model, and they have been shown to save lives. So absolutely, that's a good model. It's working in many places around the country, and I actually advocate agencies taking a look at that model. It is a viable option.
Great. I like that model as well. I've seen people with autism, and when it comes to the mission of drop the drugs, we're trying to decrease drug abuse, misuse, overdose. We know that drugs, particularly opioids, psychotropics, can cause a radical change in behavior. It could be a very good person, but because of the drugs, their behavior has changed. And trained professionals can, and even depending on what they said when they call, can recognize that and perhaps de-escalate it however they would do it from a medical perspective, and we would see a lot less tragedies of someone who was even deaf. I saw someone that they couldn't appropriately respond to commands. So we do ask for the officers to play a lot of roles and recognize a lot of things that I know I'm not trained to do. I'm very highly skilled, but in an area I can't imagine just being thrown into a hospital and being asked to do everything other than injuries to the oral cavity. So you are making so many good points. My mind's all over the place. I want to give you a question, and then we're going to wrap up. Great question here from Stephen Spear. Thank you, Stephen. Dr. Bowman, were implicit bias trainings taught during your tenure at APD? And can you speak to how long some of these types of trainings have been going on in your experience? Great question.
Uh, the answer is no. Implicit bias training was not typically taught. Now, I actually left the APD in 2012, and in 2012 we were just starting to train in procedural justice, and implicit bias was a component of that, but it wasn't yet mainstream. 2013, 2014. We started to see it go more mainstream. And then with the 21st Century Policing Task Force report, we've seen more emphasis on it. But no, while I was the chief of police at APD, that training was typically not provided. It had not yet mainstream.
Appreciate that response and you sharing the history there. That's all the questions I see. Let me scroll through here. And folks, I want to point out, thank you for joining us. This will be on our page under our videos, Drop the Drugs. Please like our page and you'll be notified about webinars in the future. And also this will be on our page so you can share it tomorrow, this weekend. And if it's been a good conversation for you, informative, we want other people to be aware of it. We get a lot of views of these afterwards. I think our last webinar, we had 10,000 views in about 24 hours, and I don't know what it ended up with, but we are trying to bring relevant information. But it's important that it be shared, that people hear it. That's what I love about the web, is that it doesn't end. The life of it goes on and on. And we do have a comment here, and then we'll have a final question. Rainey says, as chair of the Fort Worth Mayor's Committee on Persons with Disability, I am very pleased that training is being offered to officers as it is persons in the IDD spectrum, as well as the hard of hearing community. Absolutely. And thank you, Rainey Matthews, for that comment. We want to end our discussion, Dr. Bowman, about policing, the past. I think we've done a great job of covering that historically, the present. We've alluded to several things going on now. And the future, if you'll tell us a little bit about technology, trends in technology, what you see happening there, particularly anything that can help improve transparency and accountability, and then wrap up with where we go from here, and in a very positive way that I know you'll do, leave us with some hope, Dr. Bowman.
As I mute here, okay. Thank you, Dr. Mo, and let me say thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show, to speak with your audience, and just to be a part of your incredible organization. I would ask everybody to do more research on Drop the Drugs, and pull out your wallet, send a donation, help them do the incredible work that they're doing. I mean, they've worked a lot with Grand Prairie, but their footprint is much larger than that. And everybody needs the services that Drop the Drugs is advocating. So please be serious. Help somebody that's trying to help the entire community. Drop the Drugs is doing that. So let's make that happen. Please support Dr. Moen and this incredible organization. Lots of new technology is coming out, but there's a new technology that's kind of old, but yet it continues to evolve. I think body-worn cameras are really important technology for police departments and police officers for a lot of reasons. Police officers or departments are still learning new ways to use the body cameras to help hold officers accountable, to help hold members of the public accountable, to help create a story and a record of what's going on, and actually to help with supervision and accountability systems as well. So that technology continues to improve And there are some vendors that are doing some amazing things with body camera technology. And I would bore you to death if I go into details. And so I'm not going to do that. But that's one. We always can use more modern records management and records manipulation kind of technology. There are some artificial intelligence geeks that are out there working on new ways to make record keeping, record creation and maintenance a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. Well, what that means is that that's going to save you dollars in your municipal budgets and your police department budgets, and that money can go in other places that where it's really better needed. So there are lots of technologies out there without me talking too much about them. But there's also hope out there. You know, we talk about defunding the police. We talk about police use of force and police interaction with the community and police this and police that. Well, let me tell you, there are, I think, people like me out there as well. And I think most police officers are probably people like me who I grew up in Stop 6 in East Fort Worth. And if you're from Stop 6, you know Stop 6. If you're not from Fort Worth, what we know about Stop 6 is over the years, it has sometimes led the city in crime. And recently, sometimes it led the country in infant mortality. So Stop 6 has been a challenging place at times in history, but there are kids like me who can grow up in a Stop 6, who can decide that they want to grow up, grow out, make a difference, do something that's important that can change people, change communities. I didn't know when I made the decision to enter policing that I would have the opportunities that I have today. So as a cop on the street, on the beat, I had one call at a time, and I was able to help one person, one call at a time. But then I didn't stop there. I kept promoting. I became a first-line supervisor with 5 to 7 people under me. And I found that my influence really expanded to those 5 to 7 people. So I was able to impact 5 to 7 people, 5 to 7 calls at a time. And I kept promoting, and I became a shift commander with 35 to 50 people under me. And I found my influence expanded that much. And as a deputy chief and a chief of police in a city of almost 400,000 people, I found that I could create policies and I could make changes and I could impact the police department and influence policing in an entire city and see and have other cities see what we were doing and in fact influence millions of people all over the country by what I did. And today, as a police practices consultant, I'm in some of the largest cities, not just in the U.S., but in the U.K. as well. And I'm able to take my humble beginnings from Stop 6 and my belief that people can do things to make a difference. We can improve society. We can do more than just sit and be miserable, but we can do some things to actually make a difference. I believe that many other T. Bowmans are out there, and many other T. Bowmans need to recognize that you don't have to be passive. If you're not satisfied with what's happening, do something. Your influence may start off small, but your impact can be great if you don't just sit on your hands and do nothing. So don't just complain. Go out and be something. Make a difference. Dr. Mo is making a difference. I think I've been able to do some things to make a difference in my life. There are police officers all over the world who are trying to do some positive things and make a difference. And I challenge you. I challenge you to be one of those people who aren't just talking, but you go out and do something to make a difference as well. Dr. Mo, thank you for this opportunity. This has been fantastic. I appreciate what you do.
Preach. I feel like I need to pass the plate. You know, my mom's a Baptist minister. I am thankful for kids like you. I've got some Stop 6 in my roots as well. I do understand the journey. We are so grateful for you and that you have taken all of that talent and put so much of that time into helping the community, and even now continue to do so. You didn't just retire and rest on your laurels. You are doing some amazing work out there. I encourage municipalities to reach out to Dr. Bowman at the Bowman Group Law Enforcement Department. If you've got legal cases where you need his expertise, please support him as well. Thank you for your time. And lastly, law enforcement officials, departments, city leaders, if you're having difficulty recruiting good applicants to your department, take that 2-minute pitch he just did. Feel free. You have my copyright permission, because that is a really, really good recruitment and retention speech regarding what a career in law enforcement can do for you and can do for the community. We are thankful to all of you for joining. Thank you again, Dr. Bowman. You folks have a wonderful, wonderful night. Visit us on dropthedrugs.org, like our Facebook page, and if you want to support our outreach and engagement, preventing drug abuse and misuse, and encouraging people to properly dispose of their prescription drugs, please do so. You can make a donation on our page, and you can get lots of good information about how you can make your home, your family, and your community safer. Thank you.